Welcome to Toastmaster Time, the show that has everyone talking. I'm Harkness, your host for this edition of Toastmaster Time, and we're going to have a very special show tonight of contest speakers, contest winners. And to help us to understand that, we have our own Chief Judge, Trich Gray. Trish, tell us about the contests.
Yes, Ashley, we have a wonderful group of speakers tonight. They are winners from the recent District 57 Toastmasters International Speech Contest. When you have a contest, you have winners. When you have winners, you have to have criteria to judge the merits of those speeches. For the International Speech Contest, there's three main criteria the speakers are judged against. They are content, delivery, and language. For content, that's 50% of the total. That's everything from organization and what is the value of your message to your audience. 30% of the total is your delivery. That is, how do you move about the stage, your gestures, and how to use your voice to convey your message to the audience. Then 20% of the total is your language. Do you choose words that describe what your meaning is supposed to be, and do you use proper grammar? I think by the time the show is done, you'll be able to see why these three speakers were winners of the recent District 57 International Speech Contest.
Thank you very much, Trish. That's a great help for us to understand more about how the speakers are working. Let's talk to our first speaker, Jon Lehre. Jon, welcome to Toastmaster Time.
Thank you, Ashley.
So, how long have you been in Toastmasters, Jon?
Almost 2 years now.
And what club do you represent?
I represent Santa Rosa Toastmasters, Club 182.
What got you started in Toastmasters?
I wanted to improve my ability to communicate as well as find some leadership skills that I needed developing.
Have you been finding those skills?
Absolutely. As club president, they've been mighty handy.
Leadership training is something you get in your clubs, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, well listen, are you ready to do your presentation, your speech?
More than ready.
Okay, good. Well, I'll give you a minute to get onto your mark, and during that time, I'm going to tell our audience a little bit more about speeches and the contests that go along with it. Each one of the speeches that you're going to hear tonight is an original created by the speaker themselves. Some of them came from personal experiences. Some of them have all kinds of different ideas you're going to hear for yourself. So let's get on with our first speaker, Jon Lehre, The Cast-Off Tree. The Cast-Off Tree, Jon Lehre.
Every December, millions of people drag great big trees into their living rooms, completely confusing their dogs. They throw enough tinsel and lights on them to become fire hazards. The trees, not the dogs. Of course, I mean Christmas trees. Christmas trees have always been important to my family, but I didn't realize their special significance until a cold December day in 1989. From that day on, I saw Christmas trees in a magical new light. Maybe you will too. I was 22 years old, shopping with my girlfriend for our first tree together at a roadside Christmas tree lot in Roanoke Park. It smelled of fresh-cut trees and car exhaust. There was Christmas music playing, but this was 1989, so of course it was Hall & Oates on a mixtape from a boombox. Santa Claus, he's watching you, watching your every move. Ah, Christmas. There were picture-perfect pine tree triangles everywhere, but I didn't like any of them. My girlfriend asked, "What's the problem?" Obviously, there are no holes in the trees. Where are we going to put our teddy bears? The look on her face, much like the look on your faces right now, made me realize a couple of things. One, I sounded like a crazy person. Two, other people don't shove teddy bears into Christmas trees. My family does, because my mother made a choice. In 1969, in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, a young hippie stood in the doorway of her apartment and said goodbye to her husband, who wasn't there to hear it. She took her 6-year-old daughter by the hand and picked up her extremely adorable 2-year-old son, walked down 3 flights, got into a borrowed VW bus and drove to San Jose to start over. That was my mother, building a new life with a broken heart, 2 kids, and no job skills. We had no money, living on welfare checks, while Mom took job training classes, discovering abilities she didn't even know she had. She was so proud when we got off of welfare, but we still didn't have money for extras like comic books or candy bars. But Christmas, oh, Christmas was different. Every year, no matter how broke we were, we always had a tree. We decorated with paper chain streamers and popcorn strings, and in the great big holes where branches were missing, we'd put our teddy bears to fill the spaces. Because there were always great big holes in our Christmas trees. I didn't know they were cast-off trees that nobody else wanted. The only kind we could afford, with bows and ribbons. Mom turned each cast-off tree into something magical. The same way she didn't give up on those trees, Mom never gave up on herself. From having no money, she would one day buy a house. From having no job skills, she would create a career in computers. From having to borrow a VW bus, she would one day travel the world. Mom's last tree, in 2009, was just as magical as that first cast-off tree she had rescued 40 years earlier, when a 26-year-old hippie had lost everything. Mom was that cast-off tree, with holes in her life. No job, no husband, no future she had ever imagined. We've all felt holes like that in our lives, where something we love used to be. It's how we fill those holes that shapes who we are forever. Mom could have filled those holes with anything: anger, resentment, despair. But she chose to fill them with positive, powerful things: education, self-respect, hope. Mom turned a future full of fear into a life of love and inspiration. From a cast-off tree, she made her life beautiful. When I see a Christmas tree, I see my mom with a heart full of love and arms full of teddy bears. When I see a cast-off tree, I see hope. Mom showed me, as long as you have hope, you'll find magic in every cast-off tree.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Belle Powell. Belle, welcome to Toastmaster Time. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
What club are you representing?
I represent Walnut Creek Toastmasters.
And how long have you been a Toastmaster?
I joined in September 2008.
What have you been finding in Toastmasters that's made your life different?
The people,
The people.
hands down, high quality people at Toastmasters.
Oh, this is very true. I've said the same thing. It's the people that makes the difference. Well, my question to you, are you ready to give your speech?
I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a minute to take your mark, and while you're doing that, I'm going to talk to our audience a little bit more about what's going on. The speech for the contests is very, very specific. It's within a certain time frame, and as you heard from our chief judge, there are certain things that are required. In the speech you hear now, Belle will give us her rendition of how it should work. Belle Powell, The Secret of Life. The Secret of Life, Belle Powell.
Fellow Toastmasters, I have figured it out. I know the secret of life. In this speech, I'm going to share with you the personal experience that led to this wisdom. I'm going to let you in on this secret, as well as give some examples on how we can apply it within our own lives. My story begins before I was even born. 3 months pregnant with me, my mother, Rebecca Peterson, was diagnosed with breast cancer. By the time I was born, her cancer had progressed. She would get better, and then she'd get worse. 3 years she fought for her life until the doctors gave her less than a year to live. When my mother became bedridden, my grandmother Joan turned her den into a hospital room for her to die. And every Saturday and every Sunday, my father would take my older sister, my 2 older brothers, and I to go visit our mom. It was spring. My mother's calla lilies just exploded in the front yard. And it was Saturday. When we arrived at Grandma Joan's house, I sprang out the car and I ran into the kitchen and sprinted down the hall, as I always enthusiastically did on visiting days. But when I got to my mother's room, the hospital bed was gone. The den was just a den. The morning light filtered in through the evergreen outside the window, and it washed over the tan carpets, bouncing off the mirrors and my grandmother's crystal candlesticks. I stood in the hollow room, watching the rainbows dance on the walls, confused. My father followed in behind me, fighting the swell of grief that was consuming him. He sat down and did his best to explain death and his idea of heaven to his 3-year-old little girl, me. The clouds drifted across the sun, and those rainbows disappeared from the walls. Fellow Toastmasters, this is not a sob story. Coming to terms with my own mortality at such a young age gave me a very unique perspective on life and death. It taught me the secret of life. What is the secret of life? Not talking about how this happened. The secret to life is happiness. You see, just as courage is not the absence of fear, happiness is not the absence of sorrow, but it's a choice. My own happiness comes from a very deep understanding that nothing lasts forever, and appreciating what I have while I have it. In moments of joy and abundance, be present. It's a gift that only you can give yourself. And in moments of anger and hardship, remember that those moments can't last forever. They're subject to life and death, just as all energy in the universe is. And if you find yourself overwhelmed by the bills, by work, by the kids, take comfort. We're all gonna die. It's easy to get consumed in the day-to-day dramas and the first world problems that the reality of life and death and the big picture just eludes our emotional spectrum. For instance, the Wi-Fi on transit will not let me download anything. Ever find yourself in a technological rage? My computer knows. I sure have. First world problem. Where I see so many of us getting it wrong is that we'll think that happiness is having or doing what you want. But the flaw in this thinking is that it puts distance between you and your happiness. René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, once said, "I think, and therefore I am." When we find ourselves thinking, "I'll be happy when I have that income," and "I'll be happy when I'm driving that convertible," "I'll be happy when I lose these love handles," "I'll be happy when I achieve my DTM." What we're really telling ourselves is that I'm not happy now. That our happiness is reliant on some sort of circumstance. We think, and therefore we are. The secret to happiness, the secret to life, is that our thoughts will control our emotional journeys. Have you ever found yourself driving on the freeway behind someone going way too slow and think, "What an idiot"? Meanwhile, someone zooms right past you. "What a maniac." We have the power. We have the power to control what we think about and how we think about it. By taking control of our own thoughts, we take control of our own happiness. We take control of our own lives. We can't always control circumstance. My mother passed, and I grew up without her, a motherless child. And now that I'm embarking on my own motherhood, I don't dwell on her absence, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the family I get to share this with. And I'm grateful for my friends. And I'm grateful for the loss that taught me this gratitude, the secret of life.
Help me welcome our next speaker, James Jeffley. James, welcome to Toastmaster Time.
Thank you, Ashley.
James, how long have you been in Toastmasters?
A year and 7 months.
A year and 7 months, and what club do you represent?
East Bay Toastmasters in Oakland.
In Oakland. So what has been the most important thing for you to learn in Toastmastering?
Be real.
Being real. I've heard you speak. I imagine I can say with great qualifications, that's really appropriate for you. Being real, very good. Now, in terms of being real, are you really ready to give your speech?
I really am.
Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to do that, and while you're getting to take your mark, I'm going to tell our audience a little bit more about the speeches. The speeches that you are hearing tonight, as you've already seen, they involve emotions, experiences that take us to other places, other times, other thoughts. They're a reflection of ourselves. And with that, it's time for us to hear from James Jeffley. James Jeffley, The Line. The Line, James Jeffley.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever had to choose between speaking your mind and biting your tongue? Between playing big and playing small? Between being yourself or being liked? Those are difficult choices all of us face virtually every day. And they're choices that exist on either side of an invisible line. I want to share my story about when I first encountered the line. I've been speaking in front of audiences since I was 5 years old. By the time I was 16, I had already won a number of speech and debate contests. I thought I was hot stuff. In my senior year in high school, I decided to take a speech class. I thought it would be an easy A. I walked into that class full of accomplishments, pride, and arrogance. My teacher asked if I would give one of my award-winning speeches. I said, certainly. When I finished, she gave me her feedback. She looked at me and she said, Mr. Jeffley, That was an outstanding speech. It was well written and delivered. And then she said 4 words that would serve as a turning point in my life. She said, "But it wasn't you." I did not see that coming. She continued, "I don't know who that was giving a speech, if it was a character or an impression, but it wasn't you." You see, Mr. Jeffley, there's a difference between saying something well and saying something real. I was speechless. I just stood there, my ego burst, pride and arrogance oozing out of me. And the only thing I could think of in that moment were the lyrics to a James Brown song. I was talking loud and saying nothing. And she saw right through me. She called me out. More importantly, she called me forth. She challenged me to be real. And that was the first time I can recall ever seeing the line. The line that separates what is real and authentic from whatever I was doing over there in that speech. I couldn't see it, but she could, and she helped me learn to see it. And I swore from that moment I was going to be real. And thus I set myself up for the most difficult struggle of my life, because I had no idea how hard it would be to be real in this world. I grew up in the Midwest with 2 parents, a Native American father and an African American mother. I didn't know which one to choose. Was I Indian? Was I black? Was I a mix? And listening to family and friends and teachers and the media and movies and music and TV and magazines and all of these different voices, all of these different ideas about who I should be and what it meant to be real, I was confused. Every now and then I would hear my own voice trying to lead me back towards the line, back to some sense of my own real self. And the closer I got, there were times when I would just be snatched back over here by the desire to fit in. And the more I listened to all those different voices about what is real, the more confused I was. And after a while, I realized how they all started to sound the same. Undifferentiated, unremarkable, unreal. You see, life really is different on both sides of the line. On that side of the line, you would find the real, unvarnished, unpolished, unapologetic, accept me, warts and all as I am, me. Oh, but over here on this side, oh, you find something different. You find the polished, practiced version of me, the idea of me, the story of me, the me that you think I am. The me that has sacrificed authenticity at the altar of wanting to be liked. The me that has real things to say, but often lacks the courage to say them. Another great teacher in my life, Osho, once said, "You cannot tell the truth unless you're courageous. You cannot be loving unless you're courageous. Hence, courage comes first and everything else follows." You see, if I had the courage to live on that side of the line, I would say 4 words to every young man whose underwear I see. Pull up your pants. Stop trying to live out a fashion statement whose origins you have no idea about. If I had the courage to live on that side of the line, I would say 4 words to every corporation. Pay a living wage. Why? Because people can't live on a trickle. And if I had the courage to live on that side of the line, I would finally admit to the rest of the world a secret that I've been holding on to for over 4 years. A secret that, until only about 2 months ago, I had only shared with 4 people. A secret that if I admitted it would mean that my version of happily ever after was finally over. And some of you might think I'm a failure. But as one of those 4 friends often reminds me, James, you are as sick as the secrets you keep. Well, I'm tired of keeping secrets, and I'm tired of being sick. My marriage of almost 25 years is over. And I have the courage to admit that now, because it takes courage to be well, and I choose to be well. So it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks or what anybody says, because I would rather live the rest of my life on that side of the line in truth than to merely exist on this side in fear. What about you? On which side of the line are you living your life? And where do you want to be? Me? I'm choosing here. I'm choosing now, and I'm choosing to live on that side of the line. And if you want to, you can too. Who's with me?
That's our show from Toastmasters Time. We want to thank the Media Center. If you want more information, you can call or get a hold of toastmastertime.com. It's on the internet. Go to d57tm.org or toastmastersinternational.org. So for all of the people at Media Center and all of our speakers and all the crew, I want to thank you and have a very good opportunity to join Toastmasters and keep on speaking.